On the afternoon of Friday, 8th May 1987, Anthony Hughes answered a phone call. A lorry needed looking at, farm work, on John Guy's land a few miles outside the village of Loughgall in County Armagh. Hughes said he would come. He was 36 years old, Catholic, married to a woman named Brigid, the father of 3 children. He did vehicle repair work, lorries and cars, the practical trade of keeping things running. His brother Oliver came with him. They drove to Guy's farm in Anthony's car, a white Citroën GS Special, registration OIA 3428. They arrived around 4 in the afternoon. The lorry needed a part they didn't have. They drove to Donnelly's garage off the Armagh-Moy road, collected what was needed, came back and finished the job. By early evening they were done. They set off for home and took the Loughgall road because, as the inquest reconstruction records, it was the straighter route. That choice put them at the hill near St Luke's Church at approximately 7:15 p.m, the same minute the assault was beginning. 8 men died at Loughgall that evening, and the British Army counted the operation as the single most successful it ran against the Provisional IRA in 28 years. The same inquest, 8 years later, recorded a 9th death. A man seated in a polo neck pullover and jeans, seatbelt still fastened, 29 wounds in his body, no weapon, no connection to the unit that had attacked the station. No idea that a stretch of County Armagh roadside had been turned into a killing area hours before he drove down it. His widow settled a civil action against the Ministry of Defence in April 1991. In March 2014, the MOD issued a formal apology, confirming that Anthony Hughes and Oliver Hughes were wholly innocent of any wrongdoing. The European Court of Human Rights, in its 2001 judgment, grouped his death alongside those of the 8 IRA men in the same application. All 9 subjected to the same inadequate investigation. His name appears alongside theirs in the forensic report, the inquest verdict, the court's admissibility decision, and the official apology. Everywhere, as a correction to the dominant account of the evening. Nowhere, until now, as the subject of the account itself. The 8 men Anthony Hughes drove toward had spent the previous 2 years constructing one of the most effective bombing campaigns the Provisional IRA had run in rural Ulster. The East Tyrone Brigade was, by the mid-1980s, among the most operationally capable and ideologically coherent units the organisation had produced. Its core support ran through the nationalist townlands of eastern County Tyrone, Galbally, Capper, Carrickmore, Pomeroy, communities reshaped by the 1981 hunger strikes. At its head was Patrick Joseph Kelly, born in 1957 in Capper. Kelly had risen through the ranks to serve as officer commanding, functioning as the operational bridge between the unit's local knowledge and IRA General Headquarters. His family connection to Republican militancy ran 2 generations. His uncle Liam Kelly had founded Saor Ula in the 1950s, a breakaway group that ran its own short cross-border campaign. The ideological direction of the East Tyrone operation was shaped most forcefully by 2 other men. Jim Linner was Monaghan-based and had risen to become a senior IRA commander and strategist closely associated with the East Tyrone Brigade campaign. He was elected as a Sinn Féin councillor for Monaghan Urban District Council, a seat he regarded not as a platform for reform, but as legitimation for the armed campaign. The RUC's designation for him was the Executioner. The name came in part from a January 1981 attack on Tyrone Abbey, a 230-year-old mansion in County Armagh. The house belonged to Sir Norman Strong, 86 years old, a former Speaker of the Stormont Parliament, and his son James, a Ulster Unionist MP and former Grenadier Guards officer. Both men were shot dead. The house was set ablaze. Padraig McKerney was a former escapee from the Maze prison who had returned to active service. McKerney brought operational discipline to the brigade's planning and shared Liner's conviction that the IRA campaign had become too fragmented and reactive. What these two men proposed was escalation toward a specific strategic end. Liner's prison-formed theory described the creation of what he called liberated zones, areas where British and RUC infrastructure was physically destroyed and made impossible to rebuild, stripping back the administrative reach of the state. He envisioned a permanent mobile flying column, rooted in the border counties, running continuous offensive operations until the occupation became untenable. According to Ed Maloney's research in A Secret History of the IRA, Liner and McKerney had even discussed this with fellow commander Seamus McIlwain in the period before Loughgall, meeting to consider how to procure arms independently of GHQ and form a breakaway faction. General Headquarters, under Chief of Staff Kevin McKenna, had rejected the flying column proposal as logistically unsound. The men planning to circumvent that decision were dead within months. Their record by 1987 was substantial. Maloney's research placed the brigade's tally at approximately 33 security force facilities damaged or destroyed across Tyrone and Armagh during the campaign. Declassified documents from the National Archives of Ireland, released in 2017, revealed that weapons recovered from the 8 men killed at Loughgall had been linked by ballistic tests to between 40 and 50 killings, including every fatality in IRA attacks in Fermanagh and Tyrone in 1987 before the ambush. The operational method that carried them to Loughgall was refined across 2 preceding attacks. The first was Ballygawley RUC Barracks, County Tyrone, 7 December 1985. Kelly led it. 2 RUC officers were killed, 3 wounded, the building destroyed. A Ruger Security 6 revolver, stolen from Reserve RUC officer William Clement, killed in that attack, was recovered from the Loughgall killing ground less than 2 years later. 8 months after Ballygawley came the operation that became the direct tactical template. On the 11th of August 1986, the brigade attacked the RUC base at the Birches near Portadown in County Armagh, the same county as Loughgall, not East Tyrone, a geographic distinction the brigade disregarded, and one commenters watching coverage of this period have repeatedly had to correct. The station was unmanned. A diversionary bomb had been detonated at Pomeroy RUC station in Tyrone earlier that same day, drawing security resources away. Then, a hijacked JCB digger, an oil drum packed with approximately 200 pounds of explosive in its front bucket, was driven to the Birches. The station was raked with automatic fire as the digger approached. It crashed the perimeter fence. The bomb detonated, demolishing the station and blowing the roof off a nearby pub. Several civilians sustained slight injuries. No police officers were killed. Several of the men at the Birches, Kelly, Liner, McKerney, Arthurs, were also part of the Loughgall team 9 months later. The digger tactic had worked once. They intended to work it again. British intelligence was watching. The security forces had received advance warning of a planned attack on an RUC station weeks before 8th of May 1987. The precise source of that intelligence has never been officially disclosed. Possibilities in the historical record include an informant inside the unit, telephone surveillance, and broader penetration of the brigade's networks through Army 14 Intelligence Company and RUC E4A assets. One member of the unit killed at Loughgall, Tony Gormley, was known to Special Branch as a well-paid informant, though the extent of his specific contribution to the Loughgall intelligence picture is disputed. The historian Richard English, formerly Chair of Politics at Queen's University Belfast, has stated that information didn't come from within the unit itself. What is confirmed is the outcome. On the evening of 7th May 1987, approximately 24 SAS soldiers and a special RUC unit were briefed at Marne Road Barracks in Portadown. The British codename for the operation was Judy. The station operated part-time. On the 8th of May, it kept its normal schedule, open 9 to 11 in the morning and 5 to 7 in the evening. 3 RUC constables, designated A, B and C, were on duty. Into the building in plain clothes went 6 SAS soldiers, including the operation commander, Soldier A. A 7th, Soldier F, set up communications equipment in a rear ground floor room and took no part in the shooting. Outside, 18 more SAS soldiers occupied 5 concealed positions before first light. The 18 outside soldiers were divided across 5 concealed positions in wooded areas around the station. One of those groups, positioned in woodland behind St Luke's Church to the east of the station on the south side of the road, was the group whose actions would directly involve the Hughes brothers. They were armed with M16 and Heckler & Koch G3 rifles and 2 L7A2 general-purpose machine guns. Undercover soldiers from 14 Intelligence Company drove the back roads around Loughgall, keeping watch on the diggers' movements. When a covert observation post reported the digger being moved from a farm at Lislasley Road, approximately 2 miles west of the village, the SAS took up its final positions. They waited through the morning opening, through the midday closure, through the afternoon reopening. That afternoon, masked men hijacked a blue Toyota Hiace van from a business in Dungannon. Separately, armed men arrived at a farm and took control of the digger. A bomb was assembled in the yard of the house and loaded into the front bucket. The ECHR documentation, drawing from crime scene evidence, gives its weight as 300 to 400 pounds of explosive. Early contemporaneous reporting, including an Irish government memo of the 15th of May 1987, gave 200 pounds, and that lower figure has persisted widely. The court proceedings placed the range substantially higher, and no single authoritative figure has been confirmed across the full historical record. 2 40-second fuses were wired to the device. The Mackle family's phone lines were out of order. 2 sons eventually stopped a passing police patrol. The digger was already on its way. The IRA assault team numbered 8. Patrick Kelly commanded. Eugene Kelly drove the Toyota van with Patrick Kelly in the passenger seat and Liner, McKerney and Seamus Donnelly in the rear. Tony Gormley and Gerard O'Callaghan had climbed onto the digger's frame alongside Declan Arthurs at the controls. Arthurs was 21, a cigarette lighter in his hand to light the fuses. All 8 wore blue boiler suits, balaclavas, surgical gloves and bulletproof vests. They arrived from the northeast shortly after 7:15 p.m, time to coincide with the 3 RUC officers' scheduled departure. The van and digger made 2 slow passes of the station. The building seemed too quiet. Some of the unit wanted to abort. One of the IRA scouts watching from further down the road had spotted what he took to be an SAS helicopter in the distance and said there was something badly wrong. Patrick Kelly made the decision to proceed. A man in a balaclava and boiler suit stepped from the rear of the van, raised a rifle and began shooting at the station. Soldiers A through E, positioned at first-floor windows inside, returned fire without warning. More men jumped from the van and opened fire on the building. The digger drove through the station's light perimeter fence. Soldier B fired a burst at Arthur's. The digger stopped. The bomb detonated. The blast destroyed a large section of the station and sent masonry across all 6 surrounding positions. Constable C sustained a fractured skull, broken facial bones, a broken finger, a broken toe, and bruising. Constable B was also injured. The single SAS casualty was Soldier B, who took a facial injury from a window broken by gunfire. Outside, the SAS continued firing from every position. 600 British cartridge cases were recovered from the killing ground. The Toyota Hiace van sustained approximately 125 bullet holes. 3 IRA men were killed inside or immediately alongside it. Soldiers A, B, D, and E had continued firing through its sides when the unit sought cover behind the bodywork. Soldier B, approaching the van afterward, stated a man made a sudden movement toward a weapon and he fired once. Soldier 5 reported a body that moved beside the van and fired a burst into it. Declan Arthurs was found in a laneway opposite the Loughgall Football Club premises, a cigarette lighter near his right hand. 2 men from the digger crew had run back the way they came. One was shot approximately 20 yards from the van. The second died approximately 100 yards away. All 8 were dead. The IRA had fired 78 rounds in total. 3 scouts in support cars escaped through subsequent checkpoints. The PSNI Historical Inquiries team, reviewing the case in 2011, concluded the IRA unit had opened fire first and that its members couldn't safely have been arrested. But as all of that was happening, in the seconds of the explosion and the first sustained bursts of fire, a white Citroën GS Special came over the brow of the hill at St. Luke's Church. Anthony Hughes was driving. Oliver was in the front passenger seat, wearing blue work overalls, the same shade as the boiler suits the IRA unit had been wearing. That detail is confirmed across multiple independent sources and is accurate. What is less consistently reported, and what the inquest evidence establishes with precision, is what Anthony was wearing. The ECHR admissibility decision, drawn directly from the crime scene documentation, states plainly, the 9th body, Anthony Hughes, was seated with the seatbelt on in the driver's seat of the white Citroën car. The body wasn't wearing a boiler suit. Anthony Hughes was in a polo neck pullover and jeans. His seatbelt was fastened. The standard account of the Hughes brothers holds that both were wearing overalls and were mistaken for IRA members because of it. The inquest record is more precise than that. Oliver's clothing could have supported the misidentification. Anthony's couldn't. What happened in the next seconds is contested between the soldier accounts given at the 1995 inquest and Oliver Hughes's sworn testimony at the same hearing. The soldier account, in written statements read into the record, holds that the Citroën appeared right behind the van and digger, that the car began to reverse toward the soldiers at position 5 after shooting started, but before the bomb detonated. First slowly, then at high speed and in a zigzag pattern. Soldiers S, T and U opened automatic fire. When they stopped, the car was approximately 20 meters from their position. The front seat passenger got out of the car despite Soldier U warning him not to move. He was wearing blue coveralls. He was hit almost immediately and fell to the ground. The driver was dead at the wheel. Oliver Hughes testified at the same inquest, subjected to rigorous cross-examination by state counsel. His evidence was this. Just as we came over the top of the hill at the church, we heard a loud bang. The explosion, in his account, came first. Anthony stopped the car, intending to turn back. Then, there was a heavy burst of gunfire from behind us. Oliver denied the car had reversed at high speed or zigzagged. He maintained fire came from behind the vehicle without any warning. The forensic evidence can't resolve whether the car was moving when fire was opened. What it establishes is direction. Approximately 34 bullet holes in the Citroën. Of those, approximately 26 were fired from behind the vehicle. The inquest forensic summary concluded that the bulk of the shooting at the Citroën was intentional rather than the car being caught in crossfire between soldiers and IRA gunmen. The trajectory evidence was inconsistent with the Hughes car sitting between two opposing firing positions. At the inquest, the SAS admitted they gave no warning to the Hughes brothers before opening fire. The inquest made no finding on whether the shooting was lawful. The jury returned cause of death. All 9 had died from serious and multiple gunshot wounds, and left the lawfulness question formally unanswered. Anthony Hughes sustained 29 wounds from bullets and shrapnel. A bullet entered the back of his right shoulder, traversed his chest, lacerated his upper right lung, and lodged in his right breast. Further wounds to the back of his heart, stomach, spleen, small intestine, and liver. He remained in the driver's seat, seatbelt still on, and died there. Oliver was taken for dead by at least one witness who saw him on the ground outside the car. He wasn't dead. Soldiers S and U applied 2 field dressings, and he was evacuated for medical treatment. The initial UPI wire report from 9th May 1987 stated he had been hit by 5 bullets. The figure from subsequent inquest evidence was 14. His lungs had collapsed. That same UPI wire named Anthony Hughes correctly in its opening paragraphs, Anthony Hughes of Caledon in County Tyrone, identified as a civilian, his brother described as wounded. He wasn't invisible in the immediate coverage, but the dominant framing in the hours and days that followed was built around the 8. The operation was described, accurately, as the single most successful British Army action against the Provisional IRA in the history of the campaign, the IRA's largest single loss of life since the Anglo-Irish War. That frame consumed almost everything adjacent to it. When soldiers returned to Marne Road Barracks in Portadown that evening, they celebrated with champagne. In the Protestant community, loyalists painted SAS 8 IRA 0 on the roof of a derelict house overlooking the main Dublin to Belfast railway line. On the Republican side, the shock was total. The IRA's own statement described Crown forces having surrounded them and assassinated them, and claimed that volunteers who escaped saw other volunteers being shot on the ground after being captured. Anne Foblacht, the following week, described the operation as a killing zone within which no one was to be left alive, noting explicitly that no effort was made to prevent civilians like the Hughes brothers from straying within the area. The IRA statement separately extended sympathy to the family of the civilian killed. The bullet-riddled Toyota Hiace van, the blue Hiace that had carried 5 of the 8 from Dungannon, the bodywork taking approximately 125 rounds, didn't disappear from view quickly. The vehicle's whereabouts after being removed from the Loughgall scene became a story in its own right among those who served. According to accounts from veterans who say they were stationed at Gough Barracks in Armagh in the years that followed, the van was kept there for a period as a tangible record of the operation. The side panels, as one such account describes it, still holding the bullet entry points. That claim hasn't been confirmed in documentary records from this research, but it has accumulated significant recognition among people who identify as having served, and it persists in veteran testimony because it captures something true about how the operation was processed institutionally, as a triumph held onto and shown. Thousands attended the funerals for the 8 IRA men in Tyrone, the largest Republican funerals since the 1981 hunger strike deaths. Gerry Adams delivered the graveside oration at Liner's funeral, stating the British government does not understand the Jim Liners, the Padraig McKierneys. It thinks it can defeat them. It never will. Anthony Hughes was buried separately from all of it, as what he was. In September 1988, more than a year after the ambush, the Director of Public Prosecutions for Northern Ireland concluded the evidence didn't warrant prosecuting anyone involved in the shootings. 6 IRA families and the family of Anthony Hughes opened civil proceedings against the Ministry of Defence. In April 1991, Brigid Hughes settled her action out of court. No prosecution followed. The inquest didn't open until 30 May 1995 at Craigavon Courthouse, nearly 8 years after the ambush. Those 8 years had been consumed by procedural litigation. The proceedings were adjourned twice, first pending the Devine case, which moved through the Court of Appeal and the House of Lords between 1990 and 1992 to settle what powers coroners held over witness statements. Then again pending the McCurr, Toman and Burns inquests, which ran through their own judicial review applications before concluding in September 1994. By the time the Loughgall inquest finally opened, the families had waited through 3 separate cycles of adjournment without a single substantive hearing. The inquest ran 4 days. 45 witnesses testified, including Oliver Hughes, who gave both a written statement and oral evidence, and was cross-examined rigorously by State Counsel on what had happened inside the Citroën. None of the SAS soldiers appeared in person. Their written statements were read into the record. On the first day, lawyers representing 6 of the 9 families asked for all witness statements to be made available to them at the outset. The coroner allowed maps and photographs, but refused access to statements until each witness was actually giving evidence. Counsel for the 6 families applied for an adjournment to seek judicial review. Refused. A second application also refused. On 31st of May 1995, following consultation with their clients, the lawyers withdrew, stating it was utterly impossible for the applicants' interests to be fairly or adequately represented given the rulings of the coroner. The hearing proceeded with no representation for any of the 9 families. The jury concluded on 2nd of June 1995. All 9 had died from serious and multiple gunshot wounds. No determination of lawfulness was made. The government stated the DPP's 1988 decision had been notified to the next of kin of the deceased. The applicants, who later brought the European case, stated that only the family of Anthony Hughes had been informed. The families filed at the European Court of Human Rights in September 1996. The case was registered as Application 30054/96, Kelly and others versus United Kingdom, named for the lead applicant Vincent Kelly, father of the Brigade commander. It's sometimes conflated with McCann and others versus United Kingdom, which concerns a separate SAS operation in Gibraltar the following year. They are distinct cases. The 9th applicant at Strasbourg was Brigid Hughes, Anthony's widow, born 1946, resident in Moy, County Tyrone. Oliver Hughes was a witness in those proceedings, not a named applicant. His legal standing was different from his sister-in-law's. He had survived. The court declared the application admissible on 4th April 2000. The following year, on 4th May 2001, it delivered judgment, which became final on 4th August. The finding is commonly mischaracterised in coverage of Loughgall, so it's worth being precise. The court found, unanimously, a procedural violation of Article 2, the right to life. The investigation into the deaths had been inadequate in specific identified ways. The police who investigated lacked sufficient independence from those they were investigating. The families had not been properly informed of the DPP's no prosecution decision and the reasoning behind it. The inquest procedure, as it operated in 1995, had structural limits that prevented effective accountability, and the delay of 8 years before substantive hearings was excessive. For those procedural failings, the court awarded £10,000 in non-pecuniary damages to each of the 9 applicants, and £30,000 jointly toward legal costs. The court didn't find a substantive violation of Article 2. It didn't rule that the use of lethal force at Loughgall was unlawful or disproportionate. Those are separate questions, and the judgment answered only the first. The investigation into the deaths had not met the standard the Convention requires. The second question, whether the shooting of Anthony and Oliver Hughes in particular met the applicable legal standard, was left unanswered, because the court didn't have the investigative record necessary to determine it. All 9 deaths were grouped in the same application because they had been subjected to the same investigative failure. Where Anthony Hughes's position was morally and factually distinct from the 8 wasn't primarily a matter that the Strasbourg framework separated out. Both the IRA families and the Hughes family had the same procedural right to an adequate investigation, and all 9 had been denied it. The substantive distinction, that the 8 chose to be there with weapons and a bomb, and Anthony Hughes chose no such thing, was a fact the official record acknowledged through other instruments. His widow's 1991 civil settlement. The ECHR documentation, which described him as a civilian unconnected with the IRA gunman. And most directly, the Ministry of Defence's formal apology of March 2014, which named him and Oliver and stated plainly that both were wholly innocent of any wrongdoing. That apology arrived 27 years after the ambush. A new inquest covering all 9 deaths was ordered in September 2015 by the Advocate General for Northern Ireland, Jeremy Wright, QC. The preparation work that followed was extensive. By February 2016, courts were being told that approximately 10 million intelligence records would need to be examined for disclosure purposes before substantive hearings could begin. Brigid Hughes challenged the delays in getting the new inquest listed in the High Court of Justice, producing the judgment known as In Re Brigid Hughes in 2018, and appeared again in the Northern Ireland Court of Appeal in 2024. At a preliminary hearing on 27 October 2023, Coroner Mr. Justice McAlinden stated there wasn't enough time to complete the inquest before the 1st May 2024 deadline imposed by the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Act 2023, and estimated it would take approximately 6 months to run. Substantive hearings had not begun. The case was transferred to the newly created Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery. As of early 2025, families had been told the new Westminster government intended to restore halted legacy inquests, including Loughgall. No hearing date had been confirmed. No soldier has been criminally prosecuted for any death at Loughgall. Oliver Hughes didn't become a public figure in any conventional sense. He gave his 1995 testimony, cross-examined by the state's lawyers on what he had seen through the windscreen of a Citroën on a Friday evening, and then largely receded from public record. Court documents, forensic summaries, and the ECHR admissibility decision are where his name appears, as witness, as injured party, as the brother of the 9th applicant. The primary family voices in the decades of legal proceedings since have been Brigid Hughes and, more recently, Anthony's daughter. What Oliver's life looked like after the 8th of May 1987. Shot approximately 14 times, lungs collapsed, his brother dead in the driver's seat beside him. Then the long sequence of adjournments and proceedings, and the 2014 apology, and the still uncompleted inquest. The public record doesn't detail. The 8 men who attacked the station chose to be there. They arrived with a bomb in a digger bucket and rifles in a stolen van, armed and wearing bulletproof vests, having planned the operation for months. What happened to them followed from decisions each of them made. The forensic record, the PSNI Historical Inquiries Review, the ECHR judgment, none of it runs toward a simple description of what happened to the 8 as unjustified. Anthony Hughes fastened his seatbelt and drove the straight road home. The crime scene documentation describes him as found in a polo neck pullover and jeans, seatbelt still on, 29 wounds in his body, in the driver's seat of a car he had no reason to stop. The soldiers who fired gave no warning. Approximately 26 of the 34 rounds that struck the Citroën came from behind it. The inquest found he died from gunshot wounds and declined to rule whether the shooting was lawful. That specific question, 38 years on, hasn't been answered in any formal proceeding that has reached a conclusion. The official record names him. The civil settlement acknowledged him. The government apology named him. The European Court included him. And in the places where Loughgall is discussed by people who accept the operation and don't dispute its outcome, his name keeps appearing. Not as an argument against the ambush, but as an insistence that the number wasn't 8, but 9, and that the 9th requires his own accounting. The sentence that comes back, unprompted, in those discussions, is always some version of the same correction. That the losses to humanity and the losses at Loughgall aren't quite the same list. They aren't wrong to insist on it. The two things can be held at the same time. What the 8 chose and what Anthony Hughes didn't. And declining to hold them both produces an account of that Friday evening that is missing something essential. Oliver Hughes is still alive. He is the only person who was in the car and can say what it was like to come over the hill at the church, to hear the bang, to feel the fire coming from behind. He testified to it once, in 1995, and was cross-examined rigorously by state counsel. And then the inquest ended without a lawfulness finding, and a new one was ordered 20 years later, and that one hasn't happened yet either. Anthony Hughes finished work on a Friday evening in May, got into a car with his brother, and drove down a road in County Armagh at the wrong minute of the wrong evening. The Ministry of Defence took 27 years to say so officially. The inquest that might say more hasn't concluded. What has happened, in the meantime, is that his name has become a kind of insistence, the detail that the broader account keeps absorbing and that keeps surfacing again, because the people who know the story have decided that it doesn't fit inside either of the standard framings of the evening, and they are right that it doesn't. If you found this valuable, subscribing keeps more stories like this coming.